So welcome to this presentation on advocating for your child, brought to you by the Autism Support Network Society, or ASN. And while much of this information refers to advocating in the school system, you can apply much of what you learn here to any issues, including dealing with MCFD or your service provider, parks and recreation, or daycare. I am Nancy Walton. I'm a mother of two children. I have a daughter and a son. And my son was diagnosed with autism in the year 2000 when he was 2. We started a behavior intervention program for him right away to ensure that he had quality support throughout his school years. And kindergarten and grade 1 were a bit rough, but from grade 2 onwards, he had amazing support. As a teacher, I was able to understand the school system and use my background to help parents advocate for what my son had in school. I have facilitated meetings with parents since 2002 and have met hundreds of parents and heard their stories. It is with this background that I bring this presentation to you today. And by the way, right now I'm a teacher on call, so I actually have very interesting experiences getting into elementary school classrooms. I'm often doing resource there. So I have that perspective as well. I'm going to present to you actually first what quality support can look like in the school system. And I think that's really important because it's important for you to know what to advocate for. Most of you don't work in schools and you're not aware of what's actually happening in the school system. I'm going to show you what is ideal, not necessarily what is happening. It's happening in some school districts, but not everywhere. And after I do that, then I'll talk about how to advocate for your child, and we'll get a little bit into how to make systemic changes. Behavior intervention that is most effective is based on the principles of applied behavior analysis, or ABA. I talk much about this in the Welcome to Autism series, but I'll quickly review the importance of systemic teaching of skills. Yep. Well, this is all coming up individually. Systemic teaching of skills, the breaking of tasks down into smaller teachable skills, the use of positive reinforcement to foster learning. ABA relies on data, and I'll be showing you examples of that today. Incorporates a variety of techniques or tactics, and can be taught, used for any age or any level of ability. So you'll see some examples of that in the talk today, and can be used to teach just about anything, and you'll see examples of that as well. There we go. This is just a brief look at research that supports having applied behavior analysis in schools. It's called EIBI in the research here, but EIBI just means early intensive behavior intervention, which is the same as ABA. And children who had a year of one-on-one support through an ABA program did significantly better in adaptive behavior, in speech skills, communication, and IQ than than students that had one-on-one support with general special education, which is what we have here in BC. So you do not find ABA in all schools, and especially not outside the Lower Mainland. There are some schools that do it here in the Lower Mainland. So let's take a look at what quality wraparound support can look like in the schools. There should be a strong collaboration between the home and the school team. So your home team has your student, the student's also in the school, a behavior interventionist, the one-on-one workers with the student at home, the parent, behavior consultant, and possibly a lead BI or senior instructor. And in the school team, you have your ABA support worker if you're in Surrey, but they're getting rid of that, so they don't really exist anymore, or educational assistant, EA, I'll refer to that a lot. The classroom teacher, an integration teacher who's usually the one that builds the IEP, and the principal. You might also, at the higher level, have your student support services who oversee the EAs and any programming that needs to be done. They usually write the IEPs, or the integration teachers is associated with student support services. And you might, in some schools, have an in-house BCBA, or board certified behavior analyst. That is someone who specializes in ABA and can write programs for our children. And I'll give you examples of that later. In Surrey, we have literally an ABA advisory committee. So that is a group of parents who hear other parents' concerns, and then they meet with the school district, and they provide this sort of a liaison between the parents and the school district and help improve the home and school collaboration. So this would be wraparound if this was tight and well supported. There was a lot of collaboration between that. An ideal situation for an autistic student is to have an individualized comprehensive curriculum designed with input from the board certified behavior analyst or BCBA. This will obviously include academic literacy and communication, but often there's little attention paid to play or social skills or even self-help skills or behavior management. Behavior management being very important for lifelong skills. And this is especially for children that don't need much help in their academics. There tends to always be a focus on the academics, when in fact we need to be in the playgrounds helping students with their social skills. And we also have pre-vocation skills in high school, working on possibly being able to work when they graduate. The curriculum should be designed in collaboration with the home team and the school team. And I will say that my son had a very modified curriculum, and his BCBA was able to design all aspects of his learning program. Sometimes the teacher would take 3 or 4 goals for the IEP, but in reality, he had 20 or 30 goals. And I knew where he started these programs and I knew where he ended because we took data on everything he learned. I knew every short-term objective that he was covering. And so I was always able to keep an eye on where he was. The IEP is important for goals that are more difficult to implement, like increasing interactions with peers at lunch. So it should be designed with this whole team. It should not be the teachers creating this IEP and then just presenting it to the parent. The parent should have input, and hopefully they are arranging the meeting around the availability of the behavior consultant, because it's extremely important that they are involved in your child's school IEP. The curriculum, it's important to make sure the student is integrated into what the classroom is doing and that they have an individualized curriculum to work on when they're unable to do the skills that are in the regular classroom, and to maximize the student's time. So what we have here is a video, and sorry for the poor quality. It's an old video and it's very difficult to get videos in classrooms because you have to have everyone's permission. This is my son and his, she's an EA, but she was highly trained in ABA. And what you'll see is he's with his peers in his grade 5 class, but he's, during this video, he's running his own program on his desk. He's got a token board program going to help him manage his behavior while he's doing some writing. And so he's actually running 2 programs at the same time. The EA has a binder sitting in her lap, and that has all his programs, which are written out in detail. I'll be showing you what that looks like in a minute, and just let you watch this.
Would you please take your spelling sentences and put them right here.
So he's doing a lot of self-monitoring of his behavior.
I declare.
She is erasing his work because we found that, just pause this for a second. We found that when he would make a mistake, he really liked erasing his work. And so he would start making mistakes on purpose so that he could use his eraser. So we started, well, the behavior consultant caught this and designed it so that his EA would do the erasing. And this is not a problem we have now. It was just something that was going on in grade 5. I'm going to skip down to the next video, but one of the things you'll see is the rest of the kids are there, and he is working on something totally different than they're working on. They are doing something that he doesn't really participate in, so she's keeping him busy with something that he needs to work on. Oops, sorry, got to back up one. Oh, sorry, it did go to the next video. Okay, so now they're going to be doing a spelling test. Let's see if this works. And back up again, I can't get it going. And you'll see that he's actually doing this with the class now. I apologize for this. I don't know why it's not working.
Take a good look at your words. We're going to go through them right now, and we're going to do your unit test. So, one quick review. It's out of point. You're welcome.
He is somewhat independent with spelling, and eventually you'll see that his EA is stepping back quite a bit.
You're doing lesson 3-0. What's your name? And please put your name on. Right, ready to go. Here we go. Number one. Quarrel. Quarrel. One of the things I like about grade 5 students is they will quarrel with each other very often. You guys are actually really good at getting along. That's much appreciated. Number 2. Roar. When Josh tore the paper out of his steward can, he realized he could not hand it in. And then perform.
So you see back there that he's quite independent when it comes to spelling. It's a weird thing. He actually has difficulty talking and can't really have a conversation, but his ability to spell is amazing. And he was able to listen to the teacher completely independently and participate in the spelling bee along with everybody else. While he was there, his little timer went off and he earned a token, but he stayed focused on the spelling bee. Now, I want to stress to you that he was not always able to be like this in the classroom. In grade 1 and 2, well, more like grade 2 and 3, as the students start sitting in their desks and they're working on desk work a lot. My son simply couldn't manage to control his noise making or behaviors. And so he would often go in the hallway or have a different room to work in off and on, depending on what the students were doing. And he slowly worked up to being able to participate fully in the classroom like he does now, almost fully, because sometimes even during an activity he's participating in, his timer might go off. He's earned enough tokens to go for a break, and he will go out to the gym and play badminton, or he'll go shred some paper, which he loved doing, or go do some photocopying and then come back to the classroom. So he got a lot of breaks. In high school, he was able to take courses like home ec and PE and band, which you'll see later he loved very much. And he didn't need breaks at all because he was doing things that he really liked to do. Now, this is a video demonstrating helping children learn at all possible times. So they're walking down the hallway. I'll just let Jessica first.
You.
So that is not an ABA program necessarily, but she recognized he wasn't paying attention to walking with his friend and was walking ahead, and she's explaining to him why it's important to walk with him, and that's a social skill. If this was a problem all the time, they might write a program for it and actually target it and go for walks with friends to see if he could improve that skill. This is a very non-academic program. This student, the same student you just saw before, will stuff his mouth with food, which of course can lead to choking. So the EA is teaching him to eat more slowly. In this video, you'll notice she is taking data as he eats. So if he eats properly, he gets a plus, and if he starts stuffing his mouth, he gets a minus. He doesn't see that she's taking that data, but this is so that she can understand when it's okay to back away from him when he's mastered the ability to eat without stuffing his mouth. Sorry, can't get the stuff.
Oh, we can do that for you. Right. One bite, put it down and wait to take the next bite until you swallow it. This bite. Oh, you need to take one bite. Put it down. Oh, that one is nice. Take the next one. You're holding on
So you can see he started to stuff his mouth. He got distracted for 2 seconds and started stuffing his mouth. So the EA understands that's a minus, but she, when they look at the data, they'll see he's not ready to be independent on this. They need to stay with him until he's demonstrating that he remembers not to stuff his mouth over and over again. So this is a demonstration of a very unique programming in schools. This is what good ABA is when a behavior consultant can design a program for something very unique. My son was able to read, so we taught him how to read music. He also had a good ear for music. So when he was in grade 7, he played clarinet. And we discovered that he discovered that his clarinet could make a very loud screeching sound, and he thought this was very funny. He was highly reinforced by making that sound, and finally the teacher kicked him out of band class. We immediately designed a cost response program. That's where you lose tokens if he makes that screeching noise. And if he has any left at the end of the class, he could get a treat. As soon as he lost 1 token for making the noise, he immediately stopped, and we never had that problem again. And he was able to enjoy being in band, his favorite class of all, until he finished high school. In high school, his ABA support worker also used ABA to teach him that when the conductor gave the signal to start, actually to get ready to start playing, he was to raise his clarinet and get ready to play. And the support worker had to practice this with him with prompts outside of music class until he mastered it. And now we'll see an example of how well he could be in band. And he's going to be in the, this is actually his EA, and he's to the left of her. So that's grade 8 band. And you would never know that he had autism, that he has major outbursts, that he likes breaking windows, that he can bite people, that, you know, and so on and so forth. My son had a lot of difficulties, and but band was amazing. And the only way he could be there is if we had strong programming for him to manage his behavior so that he could enjoy being in that band class. In fact, his teacher did not want him there when we asked him to go into grade 8 band, and his EA had to convince him it would work. The teacher had a student before who had autism, tried to have him in band, and the student could not regulate his behavior. And it was such a bad experience for the band teacher, he didn't want to be dealing with my son. But it turned out that my EA, who's actually an ABA support worker, was able to manage his behavior through programs like I described, and that's what made it very successful for him. So it's important to set the student up with success, have programs designed with the EA trained to implement them before school starts, if that's possible. Make sure everyone working with your child is willing to be flexible to accommodate your child's needs, and this will greatly reduce the stress on your child and minimize stress-related behaviors. The BCBA, or the behavior consultant, would ideally have ongoing supervision of the student in the classroom and be involved in the IEP preparation, monitor data on the programs, assess success of the programs, design new programs or alter existing ones, and continue to train the EA if there are any issues. That's what's ideal. That's not necessarily what happens. But there are many parents especially in the Lower Mainland and in a few spots around BC, who are able to get this for their children because they advocated for it. It's important that the teacher understands the behavior consultant is not there to evaluate the teacher, but just to help determine what the student needs to be taught in order for them to be able to participate in the classroom. So this is an example of an area set up in a regular classroom for a student who needs full modification in their education. You can see tokens on the wall, a separate seating area to work on different curriculum. There's a storage container there with manipulatives or reinforces that might be needed for the student's program. And just across from that is the table where he will work with the other students when he or she is able to participate in the classroom activities. This is another example of a student's workspace, and in the back, you can see the desk where he sits and gets involved with the class on other activities. And again, notice the reinforcers, a timer for reward programs, a large binder that contain the programs that this child will work on. The EA will follow the instructions in the program right up, take data and graph the data. And the BCBA can then check over the data. So everything is in that binder, and the parent can have access to that binder at any time too, and you always know what your child is learning. ABA instruction should be occurring at all times possible, or in good instruction, period, not necessarily ABA. But if you don't have bell-to-bell coverage, it's important to pick times that will maximize the needs of your child. Where is there deficit or excess areas that the child needs to work on? And quite often, there is needs in social time versus academic time. A lot of people tend to focus on the academics and forget that if this child doesn't learn the soft skills of interacting with other people, it's very difficult for them to work in the future and have relationships. So keep in mind that ABA programs and IEP goals should have discrete and objective long-term outcomes and short-term outcomes that are teaching strategies. The teaching strategies should be scripted and data should be collected. So these are the ideal things to have in an ABA program. I'm going to show you what each of these might look like. So this is an example of what I mean by a scripted program. They don't all have to be written this way, but they should have a long-term objective. You know what your goal is, and then short-term objectives that you master before you go on to the next short-term objective, and you slowly work your way up to being fully mastered. So here's an example of circle time. Circle time program is very important. And I have given this presentation for many years, but just a couple of years ago, I was in a grade 2 classroom. I was just going to let the teacher know I was coming because I was a teacher on call and replacing the resource teacher. And sometimes they don't know someone is actually going to come and replace the teacher. So I was popping in to let her know, and she was trying to do circle time with her students. And the student with autism was crawling around on the floor, and the EA was chasing after them, going, time to go to circle time, time to go to circle time, time to go to circle time. That totally reinforced that student's behavior, because they just kept running around and hiding under furniture and just getting away with it. And they were having a great time, but there was no way they were going to go to circle time. And I recognized how important it was to have a program like this. It's one of the most basic things a child with autism needs to learn in kindergarten, grade 1 or grade 2. So in this case, the short-term objective is to sit in the circle time. It says for 1 minute, I think, but you might even start with just 10 seconds. So there's this is the short-term objective is to be there. I think it's 1 minute, but anyway, A is that you say it's time to go to circle time. That's the antecedent or the cue. B is the behavior. If the child remains in the carpet area with crisscross legs, that's a plus. A minus is if they try to get away. And the consequence is the C, and you praise if they stayed where they were, and you take data on how this goes. So that's a sort of a typical program. A, B, C is what the cue is. B is, did they do the behavior from that cue? And C is, what kind of consequence do you give to them? So you could have start with just 10 seconds. So this might be the first short-term objective. Then the next short-term objective, once they've mastered the first one, would be to have 15 seconds instead of 10 seconds. And you're doing the 10 seconds, and then you go away and have a little party and have fun somewhere. And then you come back and do 10 seconds again, and then you go away and have a little party, and so on and so forth. And you ever so slowly, it can take half a year to lead up to that child sitting for 2 minutes in circle time, but it will happen eventually. Are there any questions? Just pausing for that. So that's just one example of a program, and I'll show you what other programs you might find in school too. So this, I'm just very quickly going to talk about this. I talk about this in the Welcome to Autism. This little cell up here is a the behavior was not correct. So they asked to do something, they didn't do it. So they get a little minus, and they've done the program 20 times, and the child was successful only 8 out of the 20 times. Then they did another day, a different day, maybe even a week later, 20 times again, and the child was successful 12 out of 20 times. And then eventually 18 out of 20 and 19 out of 20 times. Criteria is met if it's higher than 18 times out of 20. So then when criteria is met, you draw this dotted line and you start the next short-term objective, which is more difficult. Because it's more difficult, the student is not as successful. So the graph drops again. So this is an example of a very successful program because it's not that easy. The student isn't even getting half of it correct at the beginning of this curve. But as they practice the program, they get better and better and meet criteria. So you get this wave action here. If it looks like this, that's a sign that something is going wrong with the program, and you need to get the behavior consultant in to find out what is going wrong with it. So that might be because the task is too difficult for the child. They have no idea what to do. They're just guessing. It might be they know what to do, but the reinforcer is not interesting enough. So they are not interested in whether they get it right or not. Or it might be just their interaction with the EA. So it's hard to tell what the problem is, and it's important to have the behavior consultant come in and observe the program running to see if they can figure out what's wrong. Okay, so here is an example of a kindergarten students program. Notice that there are programs in the academic literacy and communication, and you might have a speech language pathologist involved in designing some programs there. There's play skills. Playing is very important for our children to keep themselves busy while we're making dinner or to be able to play with other children. And then, of course, self-management skills. And notice that circle time is one of the self-management skills. And there's also walk with me, like we saw that boy not remembering to walk with his classmate. And of course, the eating program would go there as well. So managing self-management. These are, I'm going to show you now what maybe a grade 6 student might have, perhaps a student that's verbal or can read and write. You've got the same categories: academic literacy, communication, play or peer play, and then self-management. Programming here would really depend on how well the student can communicate, read, or write. So it might look completely different for a student on a fully modified program than it would for a student who is completely able to do academics, but needs to work on having conversations with their peers. So this isn't something you can look up in a book and design. You need your behavior consultant to understand where the child is and design programs that suit the individual needs for that child. When it's not working, change something. When, just for example, when we saw the data in that graph showed that the student was not learning, it meant that we need to go find out what is going wrong. The student is always right. It is not that the student is just lazy, as sometimes teachers may say, or that the student just doesn't care. It's our job to motivate the student and make learning successful. Okay, I'm now going to discuss how to advocate for your child, and what you saw in the first part of the presentation is what can be possible in schools. It is not what you would normally find in schools, but it might be something you could ask for if things are not working well for your child. Mostly you're going to find general special education where IEP goals are not very discrete, even though they're supposed to be. Little is done to facilitate the learning of the goals. There's little plan on exactly what the short-term objectives are to meet the long-term objectives. Sometimes there is no EA with the child to ensure that these goals are being met. And it's for this reason you need to learn how to advocate for your child. I'm going to talk about knowing what to ask for, what is the solution, understanding legal precedents, HUCO and more. I'm going to tell you what those are. Understanding the language, especially from HUCO, which is instructional control and meaningful collaboration. Writing focused letters and how to move up the chain of command. Giving deadlines, super important. Being willing to escalate, that might mean going to the media is really escalating. Getting a lawyer, sometimes by simply having a lawyer writing a letter, you will get what you want. You might have to take it to a human rights tribunal, which is a little more private than media would be. And then, of course, there's a Section 11, which I'll talk about later. That's when you take it to the school board. The board of directors of the school district, they are voted in to run the school system. And I'll also talk about joining other parents to make systemic change. So what a solution might look like. You might want to request someone with ABA. You might want to allow your child's consultant to train the EA, because you might have an EA that has no experience. And if they have no experience, then the consultant isn't going to be able to write 20 or 30 programs. They might write 5 programs and just have the EA target things that are super important. You might want to change the EA to get better instructional control. I'm going to talk about instructional control in a minute. You might demand that there are behavior programs in the IEP. You might insist that data is taken so that the behavior consultant can make decisions on programming. You might want to keep an EA who is at risk of getting bumped. This is one of the most horrible things about our school system is EAs get their positions based on seniority. And someone might be working with your child and then they get bumped 2 months into the school year by somebody with more seniority. And especially bad if you ended up training that EA already using your behavior consultant to go in and train, and then they get bumped by another EA. So you can have the right to ask that you keep the EA that has been working well. You might want the district to hire a BCBA so that your child can do better and other children can do better. You may not have your own BCBA, so that's another solution you might be asking for. So I'll just explain to you what the HUCO is. It was a lawsuit against the Abbotsford School District. In the year 2000, 40 parents pitched in $5,000 each to support a lawsuit against a school district in order to set a precedent for protecting our children. Darren HUCO was the child who they chose because his behaviors deteriorated within a few months of being in school to the point where he had to be taken out of school. When he went back home and was involved in a home-based ABA program, he got better. And then once better, the district tried taking him back again, and he would deteriorate again. And deteriorating meant being self-injurious and aggressive. Learning was not occurring in the school. So the decision in this case came about in 2006, and it gave parents two very clear rights. Their children should be under instructional control, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. And the school must have meaningful consultation with the family. So instructional control applies to any behavior you want the child to do. That they would be successful in any program written for their level of functioning. Instructional control is not just limited to having the child behave nicely in the classroom. It also means the child is producing work that is demonstrating their full potential. So here is an example. This is an excellent example. On the left side is a drawing made when an inexperienced EA was with the student while an ABA support worker was in a meeting with the BCBA. When the ABA support worker came back and saw that the child had poor writing and a sloppy picture, she said to the BCBA that he is much capable of doing better than that. So she had him redo the work, and you can see on the right side what he was able to do with that ABA support worker. So that is instructional control, when you have an expectation and that child will perform to that expectation. That child did not want to perform or wasn't given the expectation that he performed to the same level by that EA that was just having him temporarily. Now, it's important to note that it's not necessarily training that can make the difference. Once when I was a teacher on call in a grade 5 classroom, I once observed a child who was avoiding all work, and he was slumping in his chair and he had an EA working with him, and he clearly did not want to work with her, and he wasn't going to get anything done. A different EA came in the afternoon, and the student was completely different. He was willing to do whatever that EA asked him to do. I could hardly blame the student because the first EA just seemed to be annoying, and she just didn't have that special touch. So sometimes it's just this good connection or this special touch with the children. But this child should not have to work with someone that doesn't actually have instructional control over him. That means cannot convince him to do decent work in the classroom. Okay, so HUCO does not get into so much, back to instructional control before I get on to instructional control still. So instructional control, you're not in the classroom, so sometimes you can't see this sort of thing that I observed with this grade 5 student. You may not know that there's one EA that's good and one that isn't. But if your child's academic work at home seems to be better than it is at school, then you know there's something going on not so well in the school. For example, your child might be spending a lot of time at home doing homework because they're not getting that work done in the school. If they're disengaged in the classroom, they're not being involved with the other students in the classroom, that is lack of instructional control. For example, that EA chasing the child around, time to go to circle time, she did not have instructional control over that child. It wasn't her fault, really. She simply didn't have the training or the programming to be able to gain instructional control of that child. I'm sure she could have learned it very well. Anyway, the district does not have instructional control if they are expecting the student to only attend part-time because they cannot manage the child's behaviors. That is where sometimes the Autism Support Network can come in and explain tactics that the school district can do to better support that child. For example, have a board-certified behavior analyst working for the district or get one involved with the child so they can design programs that will help better manage, the child can better manage their behaviors, and then they can stay in school longer. This is definitely not something we should have to put up with. Our children have the right to be in school part-time. It's probably one of the biggest problems I see parents come to us with. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about meaningful consultation. It was difficult to describe meaningful consultation, so the judge in the Hugo case went into detail on what is not meaningful consultation. And quite honestly, this judge found all these things going on with the Hugo family and made it clear that these things should not be happening. So the district should not be listing their options as the only choices. Nope, we don't do ABA because we believe this should be happening instead. They can't do that. That's not meaningful consultation. They can't say that they're going to do something and then not do it. And this happens a lot of times with parents in the playground. The principal will say, oh, we're going to do this and it'll be great. And then nothing ever happens. So they've kind of consulted with the parent, but they didn't follow up on it. I'll talk about how to deal with that in a minute. So rejecting things out of hand, just saying, nope, that's just not what we do here. That's not meaningful consultation. The district should not be intimidating people. And this is very important. If you're feeling intimidated at all, reach out to the Autism Support Network or a family friend, or reach out to our closed parent group and get somebody to stand with you on this and be your backup. More examples, it's doing something like calling in the provincial autism support, POPARD, without informing the parents, or doing a testing on the child without informing the parents, or getting, for example, a weighted blanket for the child. There's no evidence to show that's an effective support. And in fact can be dangerous. So they should not be doing these things without informing the parent. They should not be following a perceived policy or philosophy without inquiring about individual consideration. They shouldn't be setting up the strategy for meetings beforehand. And I'm going to be telling you a story later today where that actually happened to me. They came to a meeting with me with what they decided was going to happen. And I had to fight against that. They can't reject requests before hearing them or understanding. When I first started advocating for ABA in the Surrey School District, they were no, no, no. It was like no, no, left, right. And one day, the psychologist for the district called me in, and an assistant superintendent, and sat down with me and started asking me, what is ABA? They actually had no idea what it was, but they just kept saying no because it was just something the school district didn't do. Finally, they came to understand what it was and actually implemented a good program. But they can't just reject something just because they don't understand it. They can't recommend interventions, or they can't introduce it without talking with the parents, interventions that are not based in evidence. And they must include recommendations from the home-based team, for example, making sure that the BCBA is available for the meeting. So they can't really call a meeting, oh, we're going to meet at the end of this week, and if you guys can make it, that's great, and if not, too bad. They can't do that. They have to accommodate the whole home team. And they need to train the EA if you've got a child with behaviors that need to be, need someone well-trained. Oops, sorry, we've got more. They can't leave parents from providing input into criteria for the EA. They can't schedule meetings. I already talked about that. They can't have secret meetings before a Section 11 appeal. That's when you take your concerns to the school district board of directors. So they can't just meet with the board of directors and say, well, don't listen to those parents. They're like crazy. They can't do that. There's the Section 11 should be without bias. They can't share information with the board without the parents knowing about it. They can't refuse the recording of a hearing, especially the Section 11, or keep minutes. Should be allowed to keep minutes. Okay, I'll quickly talk about the Moore decision in North Vancouver. The district was, they had a program that was specifically targeted dyslexia learning tactics. And the district decided to cancel this program, basically taking away this child's ramp to education. It is discrimination if one child has access to education and another does not because of a disability. So the decision points out that the school district must accommodate the needs of the child when considering choices that are available in education. Just an example, the school district took away the funding for this dyslexia program, but they funded a band trip to another country or something like that. So they were making decisions about funding, but not giving a child with disability what they needed for learning. So we have HUCO, instructional control, and meaningful consultation. And we have more, the district must consider other choices. So when you write letters, you need to consider these two things. Sometimes administrators are just simply not aware that they might be violating your child's rights. So whenever your child is not succeeding in school or they're not allowed to attend full-time, find out if their rights are not being met with respect to HUCO and more. And I'll give some examples of that in a minute. So it's important to clearly point out to the administrators how the child's rights are being denied. You may use HUCO and more to fight for your own child's individual needs, but you can also use it to fight for systemic changes. We don't really have a lot of that going on now. We did with the Surrey School District, and we were very successful there when we got together as parents, 42 parents who fought for the ABA support worker program back then. So always keep a paper trail that clearly states what you're requesting and why it is important. Give examples on how it can be achieved, for example, how it's done at home or how students do it somewhere else. Make sure you use HUCO language, instructional control, meaningful consultation should be mentioned. Give a deadline for a response. And pick your battles. If you go after too many things, the school is not going to take you seriously, and then you may not get what you need when there's something very, very important to come along. Okay, here's an example of a letter asking for a well-trained ABA support worker for a child. Notice the request or the solution is in the first paragraph and uses the term instructional control, which kind of flags the fact that this is a HUCO issue. My son requires an aide who is well-trained in ABA. It is imperative that his aide be able to maintain instructional control, allowing him optimal opportunities to learn. So they've targeted that right in the beginning. Then they explain why it's important. You might want to get help from your BCBA on why it's important. And finally, they give a date in which they expect to hear back from them. And do give at least a week because sometimes principals are busy or teachers and they need some time to look into whether they can accommodate you or not. So give them a week. And if they haven't responded to them, then you move up to the next level, okay? This is really important. I've heard time and time again of parents being told that the principal was going to implement something. Maybe verbally they're being told, or maybe someone wrote to the principal and said, I'd like this. And the principal said, yeah, but then it never came about. And 5 months later, they're like, well, the principal said they were going to do this. Why didn't they do it? Well, it's because nobody followed up on it. They weren't given a deadline, and then things didn't escalate. So the principal was able to just let it go. It's very important to have a deadline and then keep going until you get what you want. So here's another letter asking for a well-trained ABA support worker, and notice the request again is in the first paragraph. Oh, sorry, on the wrong slide here. In this example, the parent is asking for an eating program similar to the one we saw, a program that is in the IEP, but the child was not getting taught this at school. Again, the ask is up front, and there's a date by which they want to hear back. And this is more about the school not following through on an IEP goal, not so much HUCO, although HUCO could be used since the consultation on the IEP is meaningless if the school does not follow through on the IEP goals. If you advocate in person, if you have to go to a meeting with the district, practice things ahead of time so that you can stay on message. Do not let the district personnel distract you or tell you that they have a plan so that they don't need to listen to your plan, that's a clear violation of HUCO meaningful consultant. So I will give you an example of what happened to me. And, you know, I'm a pretty strong advocate, and I couldn't believe after all this time, this still came up when my son was in grade 12. The superintendent decided to remove the use of a calming room that was an integral part of my son's programming. The school and staff did not want it removed. And when I met with the district staff on the issue, they came with their BCBA to tell me how they were going to change the programming for my son in his last 6 months of school, even though they had never been involved in his programming before and had no idea how damaging the removal of this room could be. They had decided ahead of time that what the meeting was going to be about. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe they came and said, this is what the meeting is about. And I said, no, we are not going to discuss changing his program. We're going to discuss how we're going to get back this calming room. I did not let them take away my right to meaningful consultation. In fact, I wrote meaningful consultation when I wrote letters to the superintendent. I was grateful that I regularly give this talk about HUCO rights, so I had it in my head. And after the meeting, I wrote letters that threatened a Section 11, where I can bring my complaint to the elected board. And I made it clear that the district was violating HUCO rights. I did get what my son needed, but since most of you don't have a strong knowledge of HUCO in your back pocket, you might want to you definitely should bring someone with you whenever you have a meeting in person. That person can help keep you on track. They can take notes for you, and they're just also on your side. So everything needs to be in writing. If you have a conversation, follow it up with an email describing your understanding of what was discussed. If they don't answer you back in the email, they are confirming that what you wrote is correct. Take notes or have a friend take notes in all meetings. If you're an English language learner, have someone you trust there who understands English well so that there are no misunderstandings, not to mention you also have a witness. Always give deadlines for your requests. This is the case with also MCFD and CLBC. CLBC is when your kid's over the age of 19 years of age. You're going to have to do the same advocating there for your child. And if you're denied your request, ask who was the decision maker on that. When you do a Section 11, Section 11 is a section in the School Act, and it is saying you can disagree with a decision made by an employee of the school district, and you want that decision overturned by the elected school board. You can't do it unless you have in writing who had made that decision. So often, as soon as you ask for who made that decision, they cave in and give you what you want. Sometimes that happens. It's even more the case if you're clearly willing to escalate, or you might threaten a human rights violation, or you might even start the human rights violation complaint. And by the way, there are people on our Facebook group, our closed parent Facebook group, who have gone through human rights tribunal complaints, and they can help you with it. So go there if you need help on that. But that can sometimes get what you want before you've even had to go anywhere about it. It's very respectful to go through your district hierarchy when making a request or a complaint. Not a good idea to jump over the classroom teacher or the principal and start discussing things with district administration. It is really fair if you let the classroom teacher know that you have an issue in writing, and then you're going to move up to the principal if the classroom teacher is not able to get what you need. Same thing with the principal. If the principal does not meet your needs, you're going to move up to district administration. Sometimes it's student services. Each district is different, so you might need to find out who to write to at the district level. Feel free to ask the principal, even though the principal is the one that you're complaining about. They will tell you who the next level up is, or you can call student services, or you can call the front desk at the school board office and say, I have this problem with my principal. Who do I go to next to complain about it? And they should be able to tell you. Do not feel bad about looking into who to talk to next. It is what the system is there for. Okay. The administrators and the administrators, principal, superintendent, they don't like you going up to the next level to complain about them. So whenever you threaten to go to the next level, they will usually find a way to give you what they need. The only time they're not going to give you what you need is if someone higher than them is saying, no, you can't do that, which is kind of what happened in my case. It is just with that threat, you're likely to get what you need. And if you have a lawyer write a letter for you, it's even more effective. So for systemic change, you might need current research. This is old research. The top, Icaseth, Smith, Jar, Eldvik, is a study that I just showed you early in here, but it's very old. It's 2002. It's what I used in 2002 to get the ABA support worker program in Surrey. So you need to look for current research. You can use Google Scholar. You type in Google Scholar, and it's a search engine that looks for scholarly papers where research has been done, and you just type in something like behavior intervention in schools or something like that. The problem is you can see the summary of a study, but you don't have access to the study itself. So your behavior consultant might have access to it, or if you go on the closed parent Facebook group, someone there may have academic access to universities for studies. So look, if you want to look for research, take that on. Okay, so making systemic change is very important. Hang on a second. I've just discovered my computer is about to die. I just got to plug it in. I'm going to lose you guys before this is over. There we go. I usually have that done. I forgot. Making systemic change is really important because your child might be in grade 1 now and things might be good now, but you have 11 or 12 more years to go, and each year can come up with different issues, maybe an unsupportive teacher or an unsupportive principal. It's often there's somebody that's in the way of what your child needs. So it is good if you get together with other people in your district and work on making systemic change. I'm just going to give you an example of systemic change that took place back in the year 2006. In the Surrey School District had an ABA support worker program. I have here did, because the advocacy, I feel the advocacy weakened a bit, and they are now losing this ABA support worker program. But just to describe what we were going through at the time, how did we manage to get this major change in a school district? We wanted highly trained people working with our children. We had a pure pool of highly trained ABA support workers available, although the demand was always much greater than what we had to go in, so not everybody got that. We had the ABA advisory. Consultants continue actually now to have access to their clients better than any other district, and they can highly influence the IEP and daily programming. Then there usually is meaningful collaboration or consultation, but I will say that my son's last year, that had deteriorated somewhat. There is instructional control over most children that are receiving ABA, and ABA support workers were child specific, so they couldn't be bumped by other ABA support workers or EAs. So how did we get that? We had a very strong ABA community, thanks to a neighborhood support group that we had going for many years. We had given several presentations to the school board showing the research that supports ABA. We had actually a mixture of highly demanding parents that were willing to protest, but also highly collaborative parents that were good with talking to the school district personnel. But that combination worked really well. I was one of the collaborative parents, and I could go to the school board and say, you know, we need to get this going because these parents are going to start protesting pretty soon if you don't get it started. So that it actually got things moving faster. The Hugo decision was looming. They knew what it was coming up with, and they started responding to that. We had a school board member who understood ABA. Their own child was, well, their daughter, grown daughter, was an ABA support worker or an ABA BI, and she really explained the need for ABA. And so we had one school board member who really fought for us. Hence, another way to make systemic change is have somebody in our community run for the school board. And the school board then hired someone willing to collaborate with the ABA parents. And this was unheard of. There were, we were told many times by the people in the district that did collaborate with us, they said they would talk to people in other school districts and they would say, you mean you actually talk to those parents? So there was a very different culture back then where it was really the parents against the school staff in a sense. And Surrey seemed to break that down and created a real meaningful collaboration. I'm going to skip that. So it's that might be something that you fight for in your own school district. You might want to ask for more BCBAs to be hired in a school district if they don't have them already. You might ask our autism funding pays for BCBAs to work in the home team, but you actually aren't supposed to pay for the BCBAs to go in the school system. So technically, you have to pay for that out of your own pocket. And that just seems ridiculous. Not only that, but the schools tend to brush off a BCBA because they are not part of the school system. So we need to fight to have the different ministries working better together. The Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Children and Family Development need to work better together so that we can come up with a better wraparound solution for our children. And you might fight for a pre-K program. In the Surrey School District, they have a pre-K, kind of like a preschool. And there, the kids use their autism funding to pay for the program. But Surrey District actually provides the location where the pre-K program runs, which saves a lot of money. And it's Semiamo Behavior Analyst Incorporated, SBAI, is an agency that has board certified behavior analysts. SBAI trains these people that are working in the pre-K program, and they become EAs in the Surrey School District, and they can actually follow a child up into the Surrey School District. As well, they do a really good transition for that child. They go to the teacher that child's going to be going to in kindergarten and say, this child needs to have flexibility for this or that. And they make sure that there's a really good setting for that child to go to. So those are some things that parents really need to fight for in the future. And yeah, anyway, it's very important. So just to recap, follow up on conversations and meetings with notes sent to those involved for confirmation. State what a solution is at the top of your letter. If the district says no, find out who made that decision. Be clear and reasonable and set deadlines and move up the chain of command. So move your way up the district. Make it clear you're willing to go to the school board if necessary or the Human Rights Tribunal. And if you do leave a school district to go to another school district or a private school or homeschooling, share your story loud and clear with the Board of Education, possibly the local press, maybe your MLA, file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal. So I will tell you that there was a family who had to leave Coquitlam. At the time, Coquitlam was completely unwilling to hire an ABA support worker type educational assistant, and they would not allow the ABA programs. They just said, we don't do that here. We don't believe, they're not part of our philosophy, as if ABA is a philosophy as opposed to research-based treatment. Anyway, they said, we don't do that here. And so these parents took their child to Surrey because they knew that they could put their home team BI into the Surrey School District. And they filed a human rights tribunal complaint, and they won it. They got money. They're not allowed to disclose how much money they got because they had to move. And the Coquitlam School District had to have a full day professional development on what is ABA and why it's effective. And I know this because it was my son's team that went there and spent the day. They met my son, they met my son's ABA support worker, his behavior consultant, and the teacher, and so on and so forth. So they met the whole team and found out what it is we do. So things improved to the point where they actually have good BCBAs working for the district now, but they still do not hire people that are particularly trained in ABA. But anyway, it's really important for the rights of all of our children that you follow up if you do have to leave a situation. Go loud and clear. Remember, your child will be in school for 14 years. Just because things are good this year does not mean they'll be good next year. Advocating for a systemic change secures a better future for your child. Okay, I'm going to stop there and see if we have any questions.